What we're seeing happening in DC and in this country is feeling pretty overwhelming. Um, our rights seem to be disappearing. Our democracy is on life support. And a lot of people don't seem to be noticing because Donald is expert at very few things, but one of them is using distraction, like mass distraction, as a weapon. Essentially, he throws so much inanity at us that we get exhausted and demoralized, and we waste far too much energy freaking out that he wants to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which he kind of did. And then meanwhile, he and his cronies are cooking up strategies to freeze federal funding and displace federal workers, which is both illegal and unconstitutional. Take a look at this clip.
Making the case, and I would let to the voters, I'm with this too. Everybody's fatigued. Trust me, I get it. It was pure hell, and the disappointment and the frustration, and I'm soul searching. What could we have done to make the case? Because we knew this was coming. We knew that the implications, and they're throwing so much at us that we're fatigued. We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction from what I think you said it. This is game on stuff right here. And I am worried with these federal employees because, look, they're in a tough spot. That some of these folks, especially those that are doing good work around environmental concerns, around justice for people, around criminal justice reform, all of the things that make our society better, those folks are in there, and they're making.
That could have been our vice president, instead, we got what's his name? Yeah. So, luckily, a U.S. District Court judge stepped in right before the 5 p.m. deadline for the federal funding freeze to go into effect. He said he was going to block that action until I think Monday because he needed more time to delve into this very complex, multi-pronged attack on the American people. So listen, I mean, thankfully, the judge blocked it. The question is, will everything come back online? Will the Trump administration heed the judge's order or not? Whatever the case, though, the damage has been done. Many, many tens of millions of people in this country were plunged into a state of chaos, confusion, and panic. Like real harm was done, even if it was short-lived. So while one thing Donald has gotten quite good at is creating shiny objects for us to look at. While we are looking at the shiny object over there, he and his minions are finding more and more ways to line their pockets with tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations and handing out government contracts worth billions and billions of dollars to people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Check out this clip.
$1 trillion pot of tax money each year spent with private companies. And Bezos and Elon and Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and the rest of the tech oligarch bros and Bitcoin bros are surely preparing to belly up to the Trump teat to suck out even more federal contracts. The money that's about to flow to Trump's friends and cronies is likely going to make your head spin. All funded by you, the taxpayer. On top of you having to fund the gargantuan additional tax cut Republicans are prepping so the super rich can pay as close to zero in taxes as possible. Not to mention you footing the bill on those 25% tariffs on your Colombian coffee and anything that's imported from Mexico, Canada, and Panama. Oh, yeah, and just wait till Trump launches his Putin-style military assault on Greenland and Panama. Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and the other defense behemoths are going to bathe in contractor cash.
I could have done without having the image of those teats in my head. But other than that, yes, points well made. And I want to be clear about something, that sometimes the distractions are the inane, the immature taunts, talking about things like Marxist equity, which is not a thing. I Quick question: why does nobody ever ask them to define the word Marxist? I don't know. That could clear up a lot. Um, some of the things with which they're distracting us, unlike renaming the Gulf of Mexico, or unlike saying that they're going to take over Greenland or make Canada a state, have real world consequences for people. Um, so before we get to all of that, though, please take a second to like and share this video. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click on the bell, because that way you will be alerted every time a new episode drops. Thank you for listening to our new podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms. And follow us here, and please give us a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. So part of the weaponization of distraction and sleight of hand has to do with allowing Donald sort of under the radar. And again, not just Donald. He doesn't know he doesn't know anything. It's the people surrounding him. The people who wrote Project 2025, the fascist manifesto, that is now the handbook for the United States government, to control Americans and to force the MAGA priorities, the Heritage Foundation priorities, on the American people and on people in the rest of the world. You may not know this, but Donald Trump is not a funny person. His humor, such as it is essentially only aimed at being cruel to people. It's mocking. And when he says he's joking, that's when he's not. Let's look at this clip.
Donald Trump reignited his calls for Canada to become the 51st state to avoid the threat of tariffs during his first major address to world leaders at the Davos Economic Forum. In fact, he mentioned Canada a lot. Trump saying we are difficult to deal with, that the U.S. doesn't need us for cars, lumber, oil, or gas. And he threw in the ask for all members of the NATO alliance to significantly increase defense spending to 5% of GDP from the current 2%.
We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas.
The trade war hasn't started yet, but 25% tariffs could be imposed as soon as February 1st.
We actually do need all of those things. And you know what else? Canada needs us to need them. Tariffs would harm both economies grievously. But again, for some reason, after years of talking about tariffs, nobody has been able to explain to him what they actually are. Anyway, most people dismiss his talk of making Canada a 51st state as being a nonsense, utter nonsense. 94% of Canadians reject the idea. But of course, there's a significant minority of the population that actually likes the idea. This concept resonates with them. And, that's part of the problem. Donald is quite good at knowing what to repeat so that people start buying into it. Obviously, this suggestion is controversial, to say the least, and has been widely criticized. And obviously, we would want to dismiss it out of hand because it is so absurd. But if you're Canada, can you dismiss it out of hand? Especially since the guy who's in the Oval Office is threatening your economy to the degree that Donald is threatening their economy. Another tactic of his is to create the necessity for the suspension of disbelief by stirring up a controversy over something as useless and also absurd as renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look at this clip.
You know what else we're renaming? We're renaming the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. And Mexico, actually, they were thrilled when they heard.
Yes, Mexico's thrilled. First of all, and again, this is where like don't let it sink its teeth into you, right? Who cares? But what I want, like, who cheers for that? It's so stupid. But of course, we're not going to stop with the Gulf of Mexico. He signed an executive order because this is where his priorities are, called Restoring Names That Honor American Greatness. Okay, then. So he also wants Mount Denali to return to its former name, Mount McKinley. And I don't know if you heard this, but the tragically, new Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth referred to Fort Liberty by its old name, Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was renamed because I guess General Bragg was a Confederate soldier. Yeah, that's where we're going. Is that That's infuriating. Is there anything we can do about it? No. But it's a marker, right? They're telling us exactly how far they're going to go. All we can do is take note. So the order that restoring American greatness by renaming things we have no right to rename clarifies that it doesn't alter the authority of any executive department or agency, and it doesn't create any new legal rights, and it must be implemented in accordance with applicable law and the availability of appropriations. But I think they're going to do whatever they want. On January 27th, news outlets reported that Google Maps will adopt Donald's new names for Denali and the Gulf of Mexico once federal updates are made. And Google, you should be ashamed of yourself. Yeah, what's interesting though, like Google recognizes how embarrassing it is, right? So the Gulf of Mexico will only be the Gulf of America for Americans using Google. It will remain the Gulf of Mexico for the rest of the sane world. So again, whether the distractions are minor and just meant to kind of get under our skin and get us all keyed up, or they're major, like multiple raids in sanctuary cities and detaining migrant workers, whether they're here legally or not. This is about exerting power, and this is about exercising control. So let's keep going because there's more. Okay, remember another one of Donald's so-called jokes that wasn't funny about annexing Greenland? Well, just recently, Donald expressed renewed interest in acquiring Greenland, and this is according to a BBC report, claiming that the island's residents, quote, want to be with us, unquote. Donald and his followers, minions, enablers, sycophants have continued to argue that Greenland's strategic location and natural resources make it important for U.S. interests, or Donald and Elon Musk's interests. And yes, Greenland does in fact have strategic importance. And yes, they do have vast quantities of natural resources, including rare earth minerals. They belong to Greenland. And if you want to use Greenland, as the United States does, for strategic reasons, you know what you do? You write a treaty and you make an agreement. And Greenland gives you permission to do that. You do not take over a whole country. Also, by the way, not that it matters, but 85% of people in Greenland do not want to be part of the United States, and the other 15% could not be reached to answer the poll question. All right, then there are the distractions I mentioned earlier that are actually causing harm in real time to among the most vulnerable people in this country. Donald has worked very hard for years now He has used the most vile fascist language to refer to immigrants using words like vermin and claiming that they are diseased and bringing diseases into this country. He's been blaming immigrants for various societal issues, including violent crime, stealing people's jobs, and causing economic strain. And he's emphasized the need to deport these people in order to protect Americans while criticizing those who support immigration enforcement reforms. He's betrayed his immigration crackdowns as a moral choice. Wow, talk about irony. And they're aimed at safeguarding Americans. Evidence suggests, though, that undocumented immigrants are no more likely to commit crimes than the general population. In fact, I would argue they're less likely to commit crimes than the general population. But let's take a look at this clip.
And it's ridiculous with the.
Amid all the resistance from across the world, United States President Donald Trump has once again made a bold statement on the illegal migrants in America. Donald Trump, who had been waiting for years to take action against the intruders' crackdown on immigrants since the very first day in office.
They had no money. They had no money for help.
Within a week of taking the Oval Office, Trump has deported thousands of migrants from the United States.
It's just going to get worse. That is something we should not be distracted by or allow other things to distract us from. That's not a distraction. That is a serious policy choice that changes the complexion, figuratively speaking, of who we are as a country and what we believe in. Okay, so right now, what's it been, 9 days, 10 days? We already are worse off than we were 10 days ago. So I wanted to look at one of Donald's campaign promises. Like, this is one of the things he most ran on, other than hating on trans people. And it was to lower, he blamed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for inflation. He blamed them for the rising prices of staples like eggs and milk and gasoline. And he said on day one, he was going to bring prices down. Look at this clip.
The issue that voters said that they were most interested in him doing is dealing with the crisis of affordability.
Right.
And we have not seen any substantial action on that. People are now paying $7 for a dozen eggs. It's a record level, 37% higher than a year ago. Are his priorities in the right place here?
I was pretty involved in the last campaign. For every time he talked about eggs, he talked about illegal immigration 1,000 times.
Oh, okay. First of all, you're a liar, Lindsey Graham. You also should be ashamed of yourself. You should be much more ashamed of yourself than Google. All right. Donald, as soon as he was sworn in, started saying, that lowering cost thing, so complicated. It's so complicated. Who knew? It's not that they haven't gotten around to it. They have no interest in lowering costs for normal people. Everything they're doing is designed to, one, enrich them, because apparently having $400 billion isn't enough to get by on these days, maybe because eggs are so expensive. And two, destroying the American government and our democracy piece by piece. Of course, Donald will take no responsibility for the fact that prices are going up and diseases are running rampant. He is always going to blame somebody else. The buck will never stop with him. He will continue to blame Joe Biden, who, last I checked, is an 82-year-old retired guy who's not president anymore. All of this is to take attention away from the failures by pointing people to the horrors. I'm pretty sure yesterday, like, people weren't thinking, oh, what is up with the price of eggs? Because they were too busy worried that their children or their elderly parents were going to starve because Head Start and Meals on Wheels couldn't function, or they were too worried that they weren't going to have access to Medicaid. So we have this tricky situation in which people are sort of being perpetually afraid, and we're getting a false sense of what the priorities are. And again, simultaneously, our day-to-day lives are getting harder. Goods are getting more expensive. And, we are seeing the effect of things like bird flu are going to wreak on the economy, of course, as well as our health. So let's connect these to the impact of deportation is having on agriculture. So the Mass Deportation Act posed challenges facing American farmers, and it also poses challenges to food costs and availability. U.S. farms are in decline, with a 7% drop from 2017 to 2022. Farmers are facing multiple challenges, including climate change, which, again, the Republican Party doesn't believe in, as if it's some kind of belief system. You don't believe in it, climate change doesn't care because it still exists. Farmers also contending with bird flu outbreaks. Poultry farmers are having to cull entire herds. That's why eggs are $7 a dozen, not because President Biden was bad at the economy. There's also, due to supply chain issues, rising costs for feed and fertilizer, difficulty finding workers for labor-intensive tasks like hand harvesting crops, which, by the way, if you look at one of those videos, is incredibly skilled work. So what's the solution of this administration to help the American people have more affordable groceries? Get rid of the people who work on the farms and put food on our table. That's the solution. Over 2/3 of U.S. crop workers are foreign-born, and approximately 42% of these are undocumented migrants. And I want to know how many farmers voted for Donald and the Republicans, because this is down to them too. I do not know how you can square that circle. How is mass deportation of migrants supposed to help the economy by creating more jobs that Americans aren't willing to do, which is why we have to hire undocumented workers in the first place? So while we're watching all of the chaos and the confusion, while people are panicking and prices are going up, and, our allies are on guard, but he keeps threatening to invade them or take them over or make them a 51st state. These people are just robbing us blind. The louder you are, the more people are going to hear you. What is that expression? The squeaky wheel gets the oil, or something like that, right? An article written in The Guardian on January 28th outlined many important points regarding Donald's manipulation and distraction tactics. Do you guys remember Aldous Huxley's novel Brave New World? I think most of us had to read it in high school at some point. Huxley envisioned a world in which excessive distraction and entertainment led to passivity. In today's media landscape, amusement and spectacle often outcompete real information. And we see this in the short shrift that we get in the political debates versus shorter attention-getting ads. And Donald has frequently employed these kinds of distraction tactics to advance his agenda and divert public attention from critical issues. I think he's much less the Brave New World vision of this than he is the Roman Empire vision of this. Bread and circuses. You can go watch the gladiators fight each other to the death, and we're going to make sure you starve. and keep all of that money for ourselves. Another thing that Donald does to distract us from the truth is to make unpredictable and aggressive foreign policy moves. Again, we've seen this with Canada, the Panama Canal, and Greenland, and, sort of a madman strategy, right? To keep your opponents off guard. The problem is Panama, Greenland, and Canada are our allies. So, not entirely sure what he's trying to accomplish there, other than weakening what used to be our very strong ties to 3 close allies. In other areas, we've seen this with securing the ceasefire in Gaza before the inauguration. The Biden administration secured a ceasefire in Gaza before the inauguration. But, Donald, of course, took credit for it. And by doing so, he undermined the Biden administration and also got credit for something he did not deserve credit for. And then again, the bizarre naming and renaming and rebranding that dominates media narratives because, as usual, the corporate media are failing us. All of these tactics are of a piece, and they've been instrumental in shaping public perception while making it easier for Donald's political objectives to be advanced. It's a bait and switch that many don't recognize as such. And I think it takes our eye off the ball so that when Donald says something serious that we really do need to pay attention to, we may not recognize it as such. So in Florida on Monday, the 27th of January, the House Republican members' conference dinner was held, and Donald publicly mused again, probably for the 4th or 5th time now, about running for a 3rd term. He had told House Republicans the same thing about right after he was sworn in. I think he said, I think I'm not allowed to run again, but he's still entertaining the prospect, prodding Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who had just introduced him. Look at this clip.
You'll have to think about that. I've raised a lot of money for the next race that I assume I can't use for myself, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't know. I think I'm not allowed to run again. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to run again, Mike? I better not get you involved in that argument.
So funny. And he's serious. He's so serious. What, do we seriously think Donald Trump is not going to run for a 3rd term? Who cares what it says in the Constitution? Yes, there's a 2-term limit for the presidency, meaning that in 2022, by constitutional law, he is not allowed to run again. Do you not think they are going to come up with some rationale? Oh, it's 2 consecutive terms, and he's only had 2 non-consecutive terms. Or they'll do what they're doing with the 14th Amendment, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, claiming that Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which is in the Constitution, is unconstitutional. That's what they're going to do. Here's what Donald said. It will be the greatest honor of my life to serve not once, but twice, or 3, or 4 times. Headlines for the fake news. No, it will be to serve twice. For the next 4 years, I will not rest. I will not yield. And together we will not fail. But I'm also going to play a lot of fucking golf. Okay. None of this is a joke. None of it's funny. On January 23rd, a proposal to add an amendment to the Constitution was written by Representative Andy Ogles from Tennessee. And this is what it said, quote, "This amendment would allow Donald Trump to serve 3 terms, ensuring that we can sustain the bold leadership our nation so desperately needs," unquote. Not a joke. That is the bait and switch. That is the sleight of hand. That is the prestidigitation. It is all a con. We are the rubes here. So I want to close with a quote from my buddy, Aristotle. Actually, he and I have not yet met, but I hear people are saying nice things about him. Anyway, Aristotle wrote in his Politics, "Yes, the truth is that men's ambition and their desire to make money are among the most frequent causes of deliberate acts of injustice," unquote. So nice to see we've made so much progress since ancient Greece, isn't it? I'm going to close with a quote from Sophocles' play Antigone. It's ancient Greek day here at Barry Trump Media. Quote, "Do not believe that you alone can be right. The man who thinks that, the man who maintains that only he has the power to reason correctly, the gift to speak, the soul, a man like that, when you know him, turns out empty," unquote. Couldn't have said it better myself, Sophocles. All right. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.